The phone record clip shows the flaps were not extended. The landing gear still down.
Why the ram air turbine were active.
A Boeing 787 Dreamliner took off from Ahmedabad on what should have been a routine flight to London. 34 seconds later, it fell out of the sky straight into a crowded student hostel. No storm, no warning, just silence, and then impact. Over 270 lives were lost. The only surviving footage captured something under that plane that should never have been there, and when you see what it was, you won't believe it. 34 seconds to disaster. So, how does a $300 million airplane take off and then crash in just 34 seconds? The aircraft in question, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner operating as Air India Flight AI-171. On June 12, 2025, at exactly 1:38 in the afternoon, the plane took off from Ahmedabad's Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. Weather crystal clear, visibility perfect. No turbulence, no mechanical red flags, nothing out of the ordinary. But before the passengers could even take their seatbelts off, it was over. The plane crashed into the hostel canteen of BJ Medical College right in the heart of the Meganinagar neighborhood. This is a densely packed residential zone. 270 lives were lost, including students on the ground. The only person who walked away was a man named Vishwas Kumar Romesh, seated in 11A right beside the emergency exit. At first, officials chalked it up to mechanical failure, but the black box told another story. This plane wasn't just unlucky. It had a long history of issues. Back in 2021, it suffered a fuel leak mid-flight and was forced to land in Ankara. Later came cracked windshields, overheating batteries, and even a full cabin electrical shutdown. And yet every time, the aircraft was patched, cleared, and sent back into the sky. A passenger on board that very morning, Akash Vatsa, recorded a short clip before takeoff. In the video, the AC was sputtering, screens were frozen, and seat remotes were dead. His caption read, "This bird shouldn't be in the air." Just hours later, that bird was gone. So, what really happened in those 34 seconds? Why did every system, electrical, mechanical, and hydraulic, fail at once? The truth starts to unravel once you look at what the plane had been through in the months leading up to that moment. Its last heavy maintenance was nearly 2 years earlier. One engine was patched in March and the other inspected in April. The next scheduled full check was not until December, 6 months after the crash. The question on everyone's mind wasn't just what failed, it was why no one caught it in time. By all appearances, this flight was routine. But routine can be deceptive, especially when the cracks are hiding in plain sight. Before it took off for London, Flight AI-171 had already completed 2 legs that same day. First from Paris to Delhi, then Delhi to Ahmedabad. That's a tight schedule for any aircraft, let alone one with a record of past malfunctions. Refueling began at 12:20 that afternoon, expected to take 30 minutes, but it ran for 42. Officials would later say that's normal for a full-capacity long-haul trip. But some found the delay strange, especially because everything else from boarding to pushback felt rushed. 230 passengers, 10 crew members, 2 pilots. Captain Sumit Sabharwal brought more than 8,000 hours of flight time. His co-pilot, Clive Kund, had around 1,000. At 1:31, they taxied toward runway 23, the airport's only major runway, surrounded on all sides by tightly packed buildings. By 1:34, they were cleared for departure. And at exactly 1:38 and 24 seconds, the Dreamliner lifted off. 11 seconds later, it hit 625 feet. Then it just stopped climbing. A single distress call came through, then silence. At 1:39 and 13 seconds, the plane nosedived straight into the hostel canteen. In those final seconds, 35 students were having lunch. The blast was so violent that nearby residents thought it was an earthquake. Flames tore through windows, walls collapsed, smoke blanketed the block. But amid the chaos, one phone recording told investigators something they hadn't expected. A teenager named Aryan had been filming the takeoff, standing on a rooftop with friends. His footage would later reveal critical clues. The plane's landing gear was still down. Even more alarming, the flaps were not extended. For anyone unfamiliar, flaps are critical for liftoff. They help the aircraft gain lift. Typically, the landing gear is retracted first. Flaps follow later once cruising altitude is achieved. But Gaerian's video showed the opposite. The flaps were in, the gear was out. The plane never stood a chance. There was one more thing caught on camera, a small spinning object under the belly. Investigators recognized it immediately, a ram air turbine, known as the Rat. This device only deploys in a total power loss. No engine thrust, no electrical system, no hydraulics. It's the aircraft's last gasp, a mechanical windmill that uses outside air to generate emergency power. So why was it out during takeoff? Then came Vishwas's statement, the sole survivor. He remembered hearing a loud pop. The lights dimmed and everything went silent. That moment of silence would become the loudest clue investigators had. For a Dreamliner to deploy its Rat, something catastrophic has to happen. The engines, electrics, and hydraulics must all fail. That's exactly what the footage suggested. So now investigators had to ask the uncomfortable question, how does a next-generation aircraft lose all power just seconds after liftoff? The Boeing 787 runs on an advanced electrical system. At the heart of it are variable frequency starter generators, or VFSGs. These supply power to nearly everything: flight controls, navigation, lighting, communications. If one generator fails, the auxiliary power unit kicks in, but the APU takes 90 seconds to start. Flight AI-171 didn't have 90 seconds. It had 34.1 theory rose to the top. Fuel contamination. Jet fuel is highly refined, but it's fragile. Contaminants like water, rust, or microbial growth can clog filters and starve engines of oxygen. In 2019, a Japan-bound Dreamliner lost engine, thrust mid-air from this exact issue. Luckily, that flight had altitude. AI-171 didn't. On the day of the crash, the plane was filled with a fuel mix from 3 different suppliers: Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, and Reliance. That's not illegal, but it does increase risk. Each supplier processes, stores, and transfers fuel differently. Cross-contamination can happen during pipeline switches, tanker deliveries, or airport tank transfers. Ahmedabad Airport had already flagged microbial growth in its fuel storage tanks earlier that year. A cleanup was planned and delayed. Whether that delay played a role in this tragedy is still debated, but the timeline is chilling. Before every flight, technicians are supposed to visually inspect the fuel for color, clarity, and water content. If it's cloudy, it gets flagged. But what if that step was skipped? Or worse, what if the results were forged? If that happened, this wasn't just negligence. It was systemic failure or possibly sabotage. In regions where political tensions simmer or internal airline conflicts run deep, fuel tampering has been used to target specific flights. A small amount of foreign substance in the tanks can ruin engines without triggering early alarms. Investigators weren't just asking what happened mechanically. They were asking who had access to the fuel lines that day and what motive, if any, could justify bringing down an entire aircraft loaded with passengers. Even before the wreckage cooled, questions began swirling, not just about this crash but about the aircraft itself. This was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a jet once hailed as the future of air travel. Lightweight, efficient, packed with bleeding-edge tech. But behind the glossy promo reels was a history that painted a very different picture. In 2013, Dreamliners around the world were grounded due to fires. Several planes reported lithium-ion batteries overheating mid-air. The global fleet was pulled from service. The first time in decades an entire model line had been grounded. The issue was eventually resolved, but the pressure on Boeing didn't disappear. It grew worse. Demand was skyrocketing. Airlines wanted more jets fast. Boeing needed a second production plant to meet that demand. Enter Charleston, South Carolina. The factory was built fast, staffed fast, and according to whistleblowers, shortcuts started stacking up just as fast. Former employees told a chilling story. Tools left inside fuselages, metal shavings near sensitive wiring, incomplete inspections rushed through to meet deadlines. One senior inspector said, "If you gave me a free ticket on a Dreamliner built in Charleston, I wouldn't take it." Guess where Air India's ill-fated flight AI-171 was assembled? Charleston. Internal memos revealed a pattern. Planes with issues passing quality checks were being cleared anyway, especially when delivery deadlines loomed. Some airlines, worried about quality control, began demanding their Dreamliners be built only at Boeing's Everett, Washington plant. Air India never made that demand. The very plane that crashed had a known track record: cracked windshields, battery overheating, mid-flight fuel loss, flickering lights, frozen screens, issues that were patched but not deeply fixed. Each time it returned to service, another risk was layered onto the last. Some of those same issues are now used in training modules for aviation investigators as real-world examples of systems trying to warn us before failure. One expert put it plainly: passengers weren't complaining, but the plane was.